welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of The Chartered Show. Today I'm joined by Tiffany and Stephanie, Financial Planning Specialists at Chartered Wealth Solutions. Welcome, Steph, and welcome, Tiff.
Thanks, Kim. Great to be here.
We thought, since it's Women's Month, Women's Day, we would do all things money and women. Now, I say Women's Month, Women's Day. As you know, it's only the 9th of August is Women's Day. But as normal women, we decide to take the whole month in honor of us. And I think that's just how it is, don't you?
Well, everyone's doing it, so we thought we'd follow.
Why not? Yeah, we always just take a little bit more. But yeah. I think it's a very interesting topic, looking at women and money. It's one of those topics that for me is not talked about enough. The differences aren't discussed in a way of how could we do our planning better? How can we do our investment better, that we're taking our women clients into account as well? I mean, an interesting fact at Chartered, we probably have about half Chartered clients being women and men. Same with our staff, and I think we're a little bit more women than men. But what we have found is that women clients want to be planned for a little bit differently. And Tiff, I thought I would start with you today and just ask you, what are the differences when you're planning for a woman client and for a man client?
So Kim, I think it is a bit of a generalization, but what we do see a bit more with the female clients is that they are really concerned with taking care of their families and making sure that everybody around them, be it their children, their mothers, they are very often putting those people's needs ahead of their own. And so we often need to remind our female clients, you know, you need to put on your oxygen mask first, and then you can help everybody else around you. So there's a bit of a shift of focus from just, okay, but I need to make sure everybody else around me is okay. I don't want to cancel this policy because perhaps my children need it. And I'm kind of saying, well, sometimes it's worth not paying a premium for a policy that you don't need. Then you can make sure that you are okay and perhaps won't be dependent on your children one day. So sometimes that kind of thinking does come out a bit more with our female clients.
And Tiff, you know, on that, how do the female clients respond to the life planning part of putting together the whole plan?
So Kim, I think the life planning unlocks a whole different dimension to our clients' financial planning when we do that. And it's so important to create that buy-in by starting with, what are we working towards? What's the picture on the box? What's the goal? What's the dream?
What's the money for?
Yes. And so when we've painted that picture, it's so nice to get that buy-in throughout the rest of the process to go, well, I know why I'm doing this kind of planning. I know where every single little piece of the financial planning fits in. And I partake in it a bit more because I know what I'm working towards. That life planning creates such a nice vision and such a beautiful story around what the money's for.
I mean, often in a meeting with a couple, I often see the wife engaging a lot more in the beginning in the life planning discussion around that, because for a lot of times they've given thought to what it could possibly look like. So I totally agree with you. Steph, my question for you is a little bit different. We've got the financial planning part, but we've also got the investment part. And how do you do the investment planning for women?
So the difference for me, just to touch on the difference, and again, it's a bit of generalizing, but I think when it comes to the speaking around investments, men are generally more focused on the technical aspects. So what is my return going to be? Where am I invested? All of those things. Where I find the conversation a lot more practical with our female clients, in that for them, it's more about what is the purpose of the investment. And I think that just really nicely links
actually
up exactly. So bringing the financial planning into the investments, and what is the purpose for the investment. So I think women tend to see the investment more as implementation of the life plan and financial plan, whereas I think for men, they're a little bit more focused on the technical aspects around investing.
And I often see with women around investing that they ask for help. And I think that's where it's a lot of times so much easier for us, because they'll come in with their questions.
Yeah. And I think it probably even goes back to, like, historically, if you think of the typical older household, the male was always the the driver. Often we see that in clients, men look after all the finances and the women just trust that the men have it under control. So I think men probably feel less comfortable asking for help, whereas I think from a woman's perspective, women are less expected to already know, and I think perhaps that makes women a bit more comfortable in asking for help.
Well, that's nice to know. I mean, and I think what we've done at Chartered, and I would say we've done it well, in the sense of how we try and partner even planners, you know, with male and female planners going into a meeting. And I think in general that helps everybody feel more comfortable.
Yeah,
Definitely.
We're talking all things money, all things women. We could look at some of the transitions, because there's some, you know, different ways that women are doing the transitions. And I mean, basically we know the best and the most important reason that we've got a plan is for when these transitions come, so that we're not overly emotional, and we've got this where the guiding light where we're sticking to. But let's start maybe with the first one. And Tiff, I'll ask you around midlife. I mean, they're coming in, and now you've got your children leaving home, the emptiness coming. What kind of questions, what kind of discussions are you having around that with your clients?
Yeah, Kim, it is one of the bigger transitions, and again, not to generalize, but something that often is felt more by the women in the household, the moms that have been nurturing the kids their whole lives, and you know, specifically for the moms that have not been working and their job was staying at home and raising children. And now all of a sudden you take that equation out of the picture. So that's one of the things I know, empty nest is what it's being called. So it's a tough transition for them psychologically. I think then going deeper into it and going, okay, but what does that mean for you financially? I know once the children are out the house, it doesn't mean they are off
You're not paying for them anymore. Ask me, I know.
Yeah, they're still very much a part of the finances. So it's around possibly talking around how you're teaching your children to manage their money. In terms of the midlife transition.
And putting in boundaries.
Yeah, putting in those boundaries.
With your children leaving home.
It's a great opportunity to teach them a little bit. But then also, you know, Kim, you've written the Midlife Money Makeover, which really talks to that next chapter, what it's all about, and how your finances can support that chapter. Where does it fit in? It definitely looks very different early on when you're building your career to now you're at a point in time where you've built up a bit of wealth perhaps. How do you put intention behind that money? How do you make sure that you are building your balance sheet correctly so that it can support your midlife as well as then the next chapter, which will ultimately be retirement?
And I mean, on that, before we come to the retirement, I mean, it's also when you have to do some of the reinvention because you don't have enough money. So you also get to this point. I mean, we're very fortunate when we do have enough money, and then you can go forward. But I am meeting more and more women who are coming in, and we're going, okay, you're not going to have enough. How are you going to reinvent so that you can go back to work after not working for so many years?
And it's a lovely opportunity to reinvent yourself. You know, you've got a bit more confidence, perhaps you've built yourself in your career, you know what you're good at, you know what you're bad at, you know what you're capable of doing. So it's a good time actually to relook at it and say, well, actually my energies are best channeled into this, and this is how I'm going to reinvent myself and make it something that can bring in a bit of money at the same time.
So again, it's just the intention behind it and the discussion. And then the next big one that's we see a lot of is coming into retirement. I mean, Steph, maybe you could share some of your insights and some of your conversations and tips that you've picked up.
Sure, Kim. Just off the back of what Tiff was saying around women kind of going through empty nest, I do also think that we're heading into a generation where potentially that transition for some women is going to start looking a little bit different, because we're starting to see more and more women being the breadwinner in the family, and that transition is going to look a little bit different to what typically is out there, where women, maybe the husband or the other alternative partner has been the one kind of doing all the nurturing, and yeah, it's just interesting.
So again, it's the stereotype where we've always said men, you know, where they struggle is when they're the providers, women with the nurturers, and now we're getting it swapped
almost
around.
Swapping it around, exactly. But on the point of retirement, I think what I see with women that's a little bit different to men, and again, sticking to the stereotypes, I think women tend to plan for it a little bit more, in the sense that women generally have more hobbies. They're normally more, I think, as women, we like our people, and so we stay very connected to people. We always have a good support structure, whether it be family, your best friends, still your school friends, whatever it might be. So I find women generally handle the transition a little bit easier, although it's not an easy transition.
No, it's known as one of the hardest life transitions.
Exactly. Whereas I think men, for a lot of men, they've worked and been the provider for so many years, and it's now kind of cutting that off, as like often it's a hard and fast line in the sand.
That whole identity, this is who I am.
Exactly. And now, because they've often not had time for the hobbies and the other interests, it's now rebuilding that for their retirement.
But on that, I mean, I love the discussions that we have with couples, and when we're having them, it's so often one wants one thing, one wants another thing, and how we have to run them in parallel, but make sure that they come together.
And sometimes one spouse wants to slot into the other one's interests, and the wife says, no, you're not joining me. You find your own interests, these are mine.
They're just incredibly maybe just stressing important discussions to be having.
Exactly.
Tiff, another thing that we've been seeing quite a lot of, and I know I've been working with you on, a lot of people who've unfortunately coming in because they've gone through a divorce. And that's quite a big transition for anybody. Maybe share some of the important insights that you've got from that.
Yeah, Kim. So I think the interesting thing with divorce is that we often see two sort of sides of where people are thinking about their divorce. So in many instances, we've got our clients coming and going, cannot wait for this thing to be done. I will just whatever it takes to get it done as quickly as possible. And they'll go into their negotiations saying, I'll take less, or the absolute minimum, or whatever it takes just to get this thing across the line. And we've seen it, unfortunately. We have seen that turn out not well for our clients. And then on the other extreme, we've also seen people going, well, I'm going to fight tooth and nail until I get my absolute fair share here. And that also has negative consequences, because you can prolong the process that's already quite a tough transition to go through. So the best way to go about it, in my opinion, and the way that I've seen works the best, is to say, right, what is it that we need? What are the expenses on my own, for the children, for myself? What do I need? And then you build a plan around that. And then with that knowledge, you can go into your negotiations and have a fair settlement, and really make things as equitable as possible, and hopefully make it as, it's never a pleasant transition. Fair, but also if you can part on good terms, that's ideal, especially when there are children involved. So, going into this with a bit of a plan is actually ideal for both parties coming out of the divorce.
And I think, just on the subject of divorce, it's often the lawyer that gets seen. And I want to encourage people, when they are going through these transitions, see your financial planner, because it's so important that that you've looked at the finances, you've worked out how best to separate them. Because I think sometimes it's not separated in the most equitable way, and that also causes both to be worse off than before. On a more positive note, I thought, Steph, maybe to chat to you a little bit around, we as women as well are great teachers. And I think if we can teach our children in different ways around money, it's also so valuable. What are some of the lessons you've seen that clients have done well, let's be on positive ending, with their children, that you could share with people listening today?
I thought you were going to ask about my own children, Kim.
Oh, no, not yet.
But I've been learning lessons along the way.
That's why I'm not answering the question.
So what I've seen clients do really well with their children is, I think, just making sure that they know the basics, so that they start saving when they're young. Even if it's not their money, it's kind of teaching them, mom and dad have got this money going into that investment for you. It doesn't have to be a big amount, but it starts educating your children about what it means to save, seeing the growth, seeing what's happening in markets, and learning some of those lessons along the way. I've also had
just actually seeing compound interest take place.
Exactly, and how they need to save and be diligent, and all of those things. And the other thing that I've also seen, which is really nice, is a lot of clients have actually referred their children to us to say, can you help my son and daughter? They need to, you know, they're starting to grow into their own careers. They maybe need to get a will in order. And we have so much to offer at Chartered that I think anybody can learn from. And if your children can learn from that from a young age,
bring them into the meetings.
Exactly, bring them into the meetings. And I've personally found that to be working really well with some of my clients.
So thank you, Tiff, and thank you, Steph, for joining me today. I think listening, you know, it's women and money, but there's another common theme that's coming out, and that is us having the conversations. When you are a woman or man going through any transition, it's the time to come in to see your financial planning specialist, just to make sure that you are going through it with the right plan in place, because plans change. Thank you very much for joining us. Please feel free to share, like, or comment, and we look forward to you joining us on the next Chartered Show.